Howdy, howdy. A little hand cracking ASMR for you to get things started. Today I'm going to be showing off the Microtech Socom Alpha Mini. I've got tons of knives to go over, but I've started with the first two Socom style knives. This is the third I have, so I figured it's best to stay with the continuity and get this one out of the way. I use the snot out of this thing. I use it's pretty much my EDC for work days, or if I'm out camping or something like that. I always carry some other options with me, but I carry just the heck out of this thing. If you're catching that with your eye, that's from the Kydex. The Kydex is pretty hard, so it does create rubbing. Obviously this has been modified, but even with an unmodified holster, you're gonna get some rubbing from the Kydex. This hasn't been modified by me, this sheath or holster, and you will get the rubbing. That's just life. Kydex is nice though. But while I'm talking about the sheaths, the reason I have these other three out in these airsoft guns is I want to show you the clips they come with. So the Socom Alpha Mini came with this, and I don't like it at all. And I'll try and demonstrate to you how it works. You unlock it. Right now it's locked. Push that over. Now it'll let you release that. This little crossbar interacts with that hook there, which keeps it closed. These little, I don't know what you call them, steps, spacers, can be popped out and placed in these holes for whatever kind of belt thickness you have. I'm not sure why you would use some of these middle things, but they're there if you need them, if you got to do something weird. Now, part of the reason I don't like it, besides the fact that it feels solid, but it's not like super confidence inspiring, especially this button. But the main reason I don't like it is, and I saw this coming as soon as I got it. I saw that pin and I'm like, that's not gonna work. Actually, right here you can see it's not lined up perfectly to there. It's kind of, this one's protruding farther. So I could probably push that in, take a little pressure off it, push it. This one's fairly stiff, which is good. This one I could move around just by kind of pushing it, and eventually that pin will work itself out into the point where that's not hitting this wall, and the spring pressure under there will open that up. And then that pin, if this opens up all the way, that pin could just kind of pop out, and then you will lose that spring in there. And I just didn't have any interest in trying to fix it. I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't trust it to be reliable. And I've heard that from other people in knife groups, that these are not reliable. They do the job, they're just not great. Oh wow, that's interesting. That backed all the way out. I just discovered something on camera with you guys. I didn't know that was doing that. I don't carry this one a ton. This is the Curahi. I usually carry this one. I just feel like being excessive because it's huge. We'll review this one later. I'll have to fix that. I carry this one a ton. This is the SBK. This is the SBD. This is the SBK. This is actually my wife's knives, and this is in a signature series, which does apply to all of these, I think, except this one. So you get carbon fiber in a DLC coating with the signature on there, as well as bronzed hardware. And you're gonna pay about $100 upcharge to get the signature series, but it's beautiful. That carbon fiber feels beautiful. I love bronze hardware. Actually, most of my collection is black and bronze from them. This is the Ultratech UTX 85. I'll go into review that later on. This actually is a signature series, now that I'm talking about it. It's got the signature there. You'll pay a little bit of an upcharge for that. Why would you want to pay the upcharge? Well, I mean, carbon fiber and bronze, that's beautiful. And the black DLC coating. DLC is super tough stuff, and it's a little less flashy. It doesn't catch the eye as much. This, of course, will catch the light. It'll shine, which may or may not be an issue for you, depending on the tolerance of your environment or what you're trying to do. If you're trying to be super tactical, you don't want anything flashy. I would like these in signature series, but they start at, this one was $262, and that's super affordable. And who says $262 is affordable for a knife, and what are you smoking? Well, I'm smoking pipe tobacco. But in the realm of USA made high quality blades, that's a great deal. This thing's gonna last longer than I am. But I'm off topic. I was talking about the sheaths. I have these out to show you the other clips. I already explained I don't like this. These both have the same clip going on. I don't know what that logo's for or what that is, but these are metal. Now, one thing I like, I'll go over the pros first. Pros is it's really stiff, it's strong, really good retention. That hook right in there will kind of bite into your belt, even if it's like I have a thicker belt that barely, I can get it past that and it hooks in properly. But even if I don't want to mess with trying to take a minute or two to get it in there all the way, because it's a little oversized for this, that bites into it so well that I'm not even worried if I don't get it 100% over the edge of the belt. So these are really, really great for that, being reliable and stiff and tough. The cons that I would see, and I haven't fully figured out what it would look like if I ran into that, but if this were to theoretically get bent out or damaged somehow, I imagine I would have to grind that off or cut that off, and then the Kydex would be left with that little weird hump there. I imagine I could, I don't know, I'm not going to brainstorm on the camera, but I'm not 100% sure how I'd fix that. I imagine I would either just send it to Microtech for a replacement, or I would get a new sheath custom made. And this came with that, of course. This atrocity is a piece of leather that I made. There's a few extra holes because I wasn't quite sure how I was lining things up. Literally just held on by zip ties and some mixed match bolts that I found sitting around. That is the factory hardware. That is not, actually the Phillips head are. They just got smoothed out by carrying it so much. And the washers are things I had lying around. So this failed me. I rigged this up and it does work. It's reliable. Obviously there's not a ton on here to fail. Maybe the zip ties someday will go. Leather is going to keep going unless it tears there, if it catches on something. But what I plan to do, or I've been thinking about for a while, and I just got to go ahead and do it. I'll probably do it tonight. Just order something like this that fits into this spacing and just throw it on there and just be done with it. Then it'll be simple. I'll have that. It'll sit a little closer to the body. This kind of hangs out because I have that. So on my hip, sits about there. And there's a little, this kind of hangs out a bit. My shirt will go over it, which is a little annoying. So that's that. I brought these out because even this is plastic, but it's still better than, I feel better than that, in the sense that it's much more simple. There's no springs. Yeah, you could break that or something, but it's more reliable. This is a double, this is essentially these. There's just two of them, which, you know, twice the fun. So I'm going to get some of this stuff out of the way, and we're going to start looking deeper into the Socom Alpha, which is what we're here for today. I'm going to start doing some measurements, do the overview for you. Let's look at this. I know it's not supposed to be a K. I noticed that just a minute ago. It's supposed to be an H. I don't know what I did. I wrote this like months ago. $262, bought it this date. 3.72 blade length, 8.17 overall length. I got these numbers from Microtech's website. M390 steel in G10. This material is G10 for the handle versus the carbon fiber you would get on a Signature series. Weight is 6.61 ounces. And for some reason I wrote the date twice. Blade thickness 0.1634. So let's look at it. This is a drop point. You can also get this in a Tonto. If you don't know what a Tonto is, I'll grab one real quick as I'm talking in the other side of my room. Wonder if you can still hear me. This is a Tonto, so it's kind of like a katana. You got that whatever degree angle that is, like you would see on samurai sword or a katana, which I have a couple of. The different blade shapes is definitely preference, but also mainly what you're using it for. They also come in a Warncliffe, which is, this tip is more like over here. So instead of, if you wanted to use the tip on this, to be precise, the very tip, I'd have to hold it out like way up there. With the Warncliffe, I'd be about here, which is a little more comfortable if you're just like processing some meat or something. But really that's preference. The Warncliffe and this, they're so close that it's hard to imagine the actual use situations where one would be considerably better than the other. But they do look cool. So I do want the Warncliffe just mainly because it looks cool. They also come in serrations. The drop point, you're only going to get partial serrations about here. And the Tonto, you can get full serrations. It won't, so it'll be serrations all the way up to this point where that angle changes and you'll have a plain edge there. Tontos are handy because if you want to scrape something, you got a flat surface there. Sometimes the tip is more strong. This one's got a more gradual angle, so the tip's not quite as strong in this one. But the Alpha Tonto is a shorter angle, so it's more about there or so. It's a much stronger tip if you wanted to do some prying, like let's say you had to get through a door that was locked. I would prefer a Tonto to this. This has a lot of blade stock behind it, so I'm not super worried about that tip breaking, but the very tip could go out. If I had to get through a doorway, a wooden door, I would use this if I had to, and I think it would do just fine, but the Tonto would be more preferable for that situation. This is the Mini. They also come in an Alpha, just plain Alpha, which is essentially the full size. And I should have written down or remembered the lengths, but essentially you get about an extra 1.25 inches, I believe, if I recall correctly. So it's just about this long, which I actually do want, not so much for everyday carry, but for camping. I want a longer blade for batoning wood if I wanted to, even though I have other stuff for that. But just the longer blade, even if I want to strip the bark off of a piece of wood, I like having a little something to grab onto if I want to use it as a draw knife. I do have other knives for that, but I like having knives that are capable of almost anything I can throw at it. This one I just resharpened. It's got a somewhat shiny edge. I've used it a bit since sharpening, but I laid the degree of the bevel back a little bit, so it is slightly more delicate because I widened it and sharpened that angle. From the factory, they kind of barely bevel stuff, which makes it more reliable and leaves more steel for you if over the life of this knife. As it gets sharpened, the smaller that bevel is, the less you're taking off. But the more laid back it is, the more slicey it is, the easier the cutting geometry works inside material. This might be a good example of the bevel from the factory because I haven't sharpened this. You can see how small, they just kind of barely touch it. It widens up over here because the thickness widens. It's thicker at the tip. But not quite apples to apples, but I'm not sure if you can really see that. But anyways, I digress. What else can I talk about? It is fairly heavy. It's not like heavy in a bad way, but it's stout. It's full tang, as you can see. This is one slab of M390 all the way back, and it feels really good in the hands. I was surprised when I got it and I ordered it. I hadn't handled one before ordering it, and it just feels good. It's a really good weight, even for how small it is. People, when I hand it to them, they go, "Wow, that's heavy." Like, not in a bad way, just like in a confidence inspiring, this is a solid knife type thing. Since I'm looking at it, these little screws, proprietary hardware that kind of looks like a face going, like what the heck? Funny little face there. Proprietary meaning this hardware is made by Microtech, and you have to use a Microtech bit to get in there. I don't know if this has a name for the specific screw. I believe most people call these the tri-wing or tri-star screw or whatever. I don't know. This is also proprietary. You got to use a specific bit from Microtech to get in there. If you're looking at my hands, by the way, if you're one of those people that gets worried about clean fingernails and stuff. I have military grade hands, not princess grade hands. I'm not a veteran, but I work for a living, so yeah, deal with it. I'm not a hand model. I thought that would be funny to throw in, just to, maybe that would trigger someone. That might be entertaining. We do have the numbers from them, but just to kind of show you, this is not the most accurate. Kind of changes around 15 thousandths of an inch. So I get 8.15, but like I said, this is about 15 thousandths of an inch accurate. See, it's not quite going to 0. Now it's at 0. I don't know. This was like a slightly cheap caliper, and I got 8.15 again. So roughly that length. I already told you the blade stock, but sometimes a visual is nice to have, so I might as well do this. It is fairly thick, 0.161, and while I'm thinking, I'm curious what the difference is between this and the others we looked at. 0.189, so the Socom Elite is a little thicker. The Socom Bravo is, where is this? Oh, 0.193. So it's actually slightly thinner than the Socom Elite and Bravo. I'm gonna go grab those real quick. And once again, I'm walking around my room. You probably can't hear me, but if you can, hopefully you get a giggle or something. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. Socom Elite, Socom Bravo. Both inspired by the same design. You still got the groove for your thumb. Full serrated Tonto, drop point, partially serrated. The only ones I'm missing are the Warncliffe shape, which is cool looking, but I can live without that for now. So why did I get these out? Let's see here. Let me put that back. One thing I wanted to look at is, I want to look at, it's probably best if I just show you. The width of, so this is full thickness up to this line right here. This is the thickness of the stock. That's how thick the whole thing is. Everything else is milled away to reduce weight or to keep it in a practical geometry. So from the edge to where that grind ends is what I'm looking at here. So 0.598. I'm going to compare that to this one. You can see we got a little bit left over there. So this is farther back, which creates a better geometry. So when I say better, it's slightly weaker if you're being abusive with it, but it does make it slicier. I'm going to go ahead and zero this, and I just turned it off. I'm going to zero that and put it back to there. So around a 16th difference, but a 16th adds up when you're talking geometry. Let's see what this one's at. I'm just gonna put that back at home. 0.644, so that's very similar to what this was at. Yeah, actually, wow. I hadn't even looked at this before talking about this, so we're both learning something here. Wow, so this is actually farther back. So this technically would be better at slicing than this, even though the serrations are there, which doesn't necessarily make it a slicer. That makes it more of a shredder. Maybe it's best if I just draw something for you guys to kind of visualize this. Let me find some junk paper. Let me get some of these sharp things out of the way so we don't have an oopsie. So, blade stock thickness. We already looked at the measurements on that. And then your angle starts. And then once you get up to here, if you didn't put a bevel there, you would have what's called a Scandi grind, Scandinavian or whatever. It's just one fine point, which makes it very delicate up here, but makes it really sharp. I do have some of those from Rockniv and cold steel something I gave my mom, Finn Wolf or something like that. Really good for woodworking and stuff like that, but a little delicate if you're going to be a little aggressive with it and you're not using it properly. I just explained that because I ended up drawing that weird. So let's look at what I actually have. So what you do is it goes to a point, and then there's a secondary bevel, and that's your actual sharpened edge when you're sharpening it. Blah, blah. That's what you're finishing, and that just changes the angle a little bit, so you actually have a fine point, and then you have the strength of this behind it. If this is farther back, which was what we were just looking at, like a chef knife, for example, if you look at a chef knife, if you have a good one, or depending on what the knife is for, you won't have that edge there. It'll just be a fine grind all the way across. And what you have then is actually a triangle like that. That's what a chef knife would be. Obviously that makes this area very weak, but a chef knife is not for turning in a cut per se. It's just for doing fine slicing. And that helps you with your geometry because you don't have all this material up here getting in the way of what you're trying to cut. Because if you imagine you're going through a tomato, you don't want it to widen up and push it apart. You just want to part it right in the center. Where else am I going with this? So what I did when I brought the bevel back a little bit on this is, instead of it being up here, I brought it, I'm kind of over exaggerating, and this drawing's horrible, I know, but I brought it back farther, so that makes it more delicate, but a bit sharper. More of a, like I said, the material isn't getting pushed apart as abruptly. It's being pushed into, and then it'll start to spread a little slower, which makes it slicier, which I like depending on what I'm doing with it. What else do I need to touch on? I've carried it a ton. It's a great knife. It's a little dirty. One thing some people mentioned is in here, along this edge, some people thought it was a little sharp. Now, it wasn't bad, but before I got this, I knew some people had mentioned that. So that was something I looked at. I probably wouldn't have even complained about it if I hadn't heard someone saying something about it. But what I did is I took a diamond file and I just kind of smoothed it out. You can kind of see, maybe you can see the little radius there on that edge, and that just made it a little more comfortable on my finger. It wasn't the end of the world, but I like tweaking stuff, making them a little nicer than how I received them. So that's what I did there. Really wasn't an issue though. As far as fit and finish, really the only thing I saw that I could complain about is, if you look here, I think some people call this edge the crown. I believe some people call that something else, but I'm not recalling the name. So up here we got a nice rounded radius. The technical thing you could say is this is a radius to the end of the knife. And I like it nice, mainly for aesthetics, but also if your fingers are up here, if you're trying to do something detailed, it's nice to have a smooth edge. And let's see if the camera can pick this up. Getting distracted by the camera here. It's very subtle, but you can see around here where it's not very consistent. There's like a flat spot. With my eyes, I can see horizontal lines versus that radius that it should be in the stone-washed finish. So what that's telling me is that this was probably laser cut, I imagine. Laser or plasma or water cut, whatever. They cut out this shape out of a stock, a rectangle bar. They cut this shape out, and then they did their machining, putting the grip and stuff like that on there, and the edge, of course, this little fold or whatever you want to call that little angle there. And they didn't quite polish that up enough, like just barely right there. They just needed to take a few more seconds to make that nice. But it's very slight, and most people aren't going to notice that unless they're pretty critical with what they're looking at. I have a background in machining, so that's why I look at stuff like that, and I look at the finer details. But that's just because I enjoy looking at stuff. So with my background in machining, welding, and fabrication, I look at these things as works of art and also something that a human made. It's not like a robot machine. Well, the CNC obviously is a robot, and these have a lot of CNC work on them, but a human designed this. They came up with the idea for the Socom design that turned into a variety of different knives. And when a human does something, there's going to be the human element of flaw and opportunity, of course. So I like looking at how I would change things, what I would add or subtract, or whether or not I would just leave it as is. And that's what makes it a work of art, because sometimes you see a piece of art and you're just in its imperfection, it's perfect. It's perfectly imperfect in its I know this is just a knife and kind of overhyping the idea of it, but I do like I like thinking that like what would I change? For example, this clip, there's a milling on these. They call it step side milling, adds a nice grip. The clip just barely hops up on the edge of that. I don't know if you could hear that. You can probably see the shininess right under that. It's just barely on the edge, and when I pick it up, it'll click and it goes in my hand and it clicks, and I have a split second where I'm like, what just clicked on my knife? Is something wrong? But it's just that, and just something like that. You know, if you just take the time to mill that out just slightly so that that's not touching, or maybe this was just slightly imperfectly folded on there. I imagine this is from a brake press machine that takes a flat piece of steel and then presses it into the shape. There's a few things that could have just been slightly off, but really, machining wise, I would have just added a slight half radius to there so that this isn't contacting that edge. Because that you know, that little thing just bugged me a bit, but I love this knife. But that's just an example of an opportunity where, you know, over time they may fix that, and that may not even be common with these, but it's just a little opportunity or a little thing that reminds you that it's a human-made thing that someone dreamt up and put in the work to make it a reality that you can just order online. With that being said, as far as ordering online, these are really available, and if you're looking for a good quality fixed blade, these are awesome because they're just stout, really good quality steel. These are quite available. They were hard to get for a bit, but you can kind of get these now. They're more produced. This is made in China by Reich partnership, and this is an all USA made. There's only a few things from Microtech that are collaborations with Reich, and don't knock them for that just being Chinese. The machining on here is outstanding. These are pretty hard to get. This was what did I pay? $343 I paid for the Elite, and these sell out super fast. I've been into the Microtech brand for the last almost 2 years now, and only recently have I seen these going for sale besides the used marketplace, like Facebook groups and stuff like that. And they sell out super quick, and now that they're actually kind of coming out, you kind of see them in stock and stay in stock for longer than half an hour, which is kind of cool. But the people will buy this for $343 and then flip it on a website like Arizona Custom Knives for like $700, $750, like twice retail. Like, it's just ridiculous. People, and is this worth $700? I mean, if you needed a knife and you couldn't just buy one and someone had one, what would you pay for it? So there's a question. But really, right now, no, it's not a $700 knife. It's super nice, but if you just do a little bit of work, get into a group of people who collect these things, you can get these used for $300, high twos, just under $300, just over $300, in that ballpark. Especially if you get a user, one that's been used by people, you can get them for well under $300. And at $400, I think this would still be a great knife. Fantastic knife. This was my This was my first fixed blade from Microtech. It was a good experience. Can't complain much about this much at all. These two probably get carried equally as much. Double edge isn't much as practical, but the serrations, the plain edge, and just how beautiful it is. I love this thing. I'll talk about that one later. But what do I say? I'm 30 minutes in. I'll probably think of something I should have covered after I end the video, but if you've made it this far, thanks for watching. Leave a comment if you have any questions. I will definitely get back to you. It's not often that I set aside the time to make a video, but if you drop a text or comment, I'll be able to answer you. And with that said, thanks for watching, you animals.